Well, thank you so much, Sarafina, for joining me today. I am really excited to dive into this very deep conversation with you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So one of the questions that I wanted to talk to you about was, Carl Sagan famously describes Earth as this pale blue dot suspended in the vastness of space. And I really want to hear from you, what is the sense when you are talking about, studying the stars, studying all these different things? How do you feel? Do you agree with some of the things that he shares? How do you feel about Earth? The stars.
Stars. Yeah, I think Carl was really interested in this idea of how small we are and sort of the grand expanse of the universe. And I think the landscape of being a pale blue dot does a really fantastic job of making us, I don't know, just like appreciate the vastness that surrounds us. And I mean, that's one of the reasons, a really big reason why I love the stars and I love astronomy and I love, the perspective that it brings us.
So how did you even get involved in the career and in the study that you're doing now?
I loved astronomy ever since I was a kid. I used to listen to Stardate Radio, which is this radio show, and I would spend nights stargazing with my dad. So I think I always knew I wanted to do something with the stars, whether it was becoming an astronaut or studying astronomy. It didn't really matter. It was just as long as it was in the field of the night sky, I was going to be happy.
So when you first started stargazing, I mean, it's such, it's a magical experience. I feel like the whole entire world is left with the wonder of how was this created. There's so many different perspectives and opinions of who created the sun, who created the stars, who created the moon, what is out there. And I'm so curious to hear, what is your thought on that? What are your beliefs on some of those theories out there?
I think astronomy is a really powerful tool to, ask those big, important, fundamental questions. And that's one of the things that I was really interested in, when I first fell in love with astronomy is, where did we come from? How did we get here? What is the fate of the universe? And I think astronomy takes a scientific approach to starting to answer those questions. So, there are astronomers who are religious, there are astronomers who aren't. I personally am not religious, but I think, it's a way of sort of taking an analytical approach to studying the natural world to try to get a sense of, where we are.
In your search and throughout your career, are there any questions that you have had and that have actually found the answer to? I'm sure you've had questions and wondered, is this how this happened? Is this real? Through your discoveries, what have you found?
So I think, I've discovered supernova. So I've found stars that have exploded. I've, modeled when stars might explode in the future. Currently, I'm looking at how fast the universe is expanding and trying to measure that. I mean, science is ultimately about discovery, but discoveries don't happen every day, unfortunately, in science. I wish they did. But it's a lot of just sort of chipping away at whatever your research question is to try to gain insight.
So what has been some of the challenging moments that you have faced as a woman in STEM?
I think I've struggled with explicit and implicit messaging that I don't belong in the field. Mm-hmm. And that's not unique to me. I think almost every woman that I've talked to or every person of color that I've talked to or sort of any marginalized identity experiences that feeling of otherness. And I mean, some people are actively pushed out of the field. I, haven't been, but it's a it's a difficult process. It's a difficult struggle to sort of pursue your dreams when people are telling you that you don't belong. So when I was a kid, I write about this in the book. I, met my first astronomer when I was, I was in fifth grade. So, I was 10 years old or something. And I told him that I wanted to grow up and be an astronomer. And he told me that astronomy isn't for someone like me. And wow, that messaging sticks with you, and I think it takes a lifetime of unlearning, especially when those messages compound over time in different fashions. So yeah, I mean, it's a difficult challenge for sure.
So what advice would you give to aspiring scientists, especially from underrepresented backgrounds who are facing similar, obstacles, and they're trying to pursue their dreams, especially women of color? Like what's one thing that you could say to them?
I think find your community and find mentors who can uplift and support you and keep you safe. For me, that has made the biggest difference. And I think when you're surrounded by people who have your best interests at heart and want to see your voice and your presence, it can help you and protect you to, continue on. So I think for me, those is really invaluable resources that I've had, and I think others, really appreciate.
So you've been very open with your career, with your journey, the path that you've chosen. You've spoken up on so many different aspects. And I'm curious to know, how do you balance your academic pursuits, scientific research, and advocacy while managing responsibilities as a PhD student? I mean, do you sleep?
I wouldn't say I do it perfectly. I think it's a trial and error type of thing. There are lots of things I'm very passionate about, and once I get into something, it's hard to sort of take me away from it. I really invest my time and energy in them, much to the chagrin of my PhD advisors. So I think it's definitely an exercise in juggling it all. But I think, especially women are used to juggling 10, 20 different things. And, it's definitely not ideal, but it's sort of where I am right now. I think, I view my science communication and education as part of my job. I think that I believe that every scientist has a responsibility to share what they're learning with the world, rather than sort of keeping it isolated in these academic circles. And so, yeah, I definitely view that as, just another aspect of my job. And I'm working on changing that.
So describe to me just a day as an astrophysicist. What does that even look like?
Most of the time is spent on your computer, so not all that different from other jobs, I think, at least in the tech sector. It's a lot of coding, a lot of sort of data cleaning, data manipulation, running models, building models, code review. I'd say 99% of my time is spent doing code. And then the rest, the last 1% is like, reading papers, having meetings. As an observational astronomer, you observe every so often, which means you use observatory to basically look at your targets that you're interested in. So for me, I look at stars that have exploded or going to explode. And those are, of course, very long nights because you're working, from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. But those are few and far in between. I think most of my time is spent just sort of debugging code.
So I'm kind of a nerd in the sense of I've always found astronomy to be super interesting. And I'm one of those that is like, okay, once you go through the black hole, then what? What's
Oh, yeah.
black hole? How many stars are there? How many galaxies are there? I mean, I can only imagine in your career, and you've probably met lots of people like me who ask you, are aliens real? What's your biggest discovery? What's the world's biggest discovery? And I'm laughing because I can see it because I'm doing it now. How do you answer those types of questions with people who do not have that scientific background?
I mean, that's the exercise. Yeah, that's something that I really enjoy doing, is breaking down these difficult questions in very accessible ways and finding the right ways of, using language and constructing your argument to like reach people who maybe don't have the same technical background. I think I said this in a book reading the other day that most of the time the way that I think about these questions personally for my work is breaking them down into sort of these concrete things that I can understand. And that's the exact same thing that I do when I try to explain them to other people. Whether I succeed or not is, varies. But I think, that's where the work is as a science educator.
So you wrote a book, and I want to talk about that. First of all, writing a book, especially about what you have chosen to write about, is really an incredible way to share and be so open about your journey. Where did that come from? What made you decide to want to write about everything?
Thank you. I'm an only child, so when I was growing up, books were my best friends. I loved reading, and I think I distinctly remember going to the bookstore once, and I'd read all the books in the children's section. I was like, what do I do now? So I've always loved, stories and sort of escaping the world that we're in right now to, I don't know, be somewhere else. So that has always been there, and I've always loved to write. I think I've said many times before that I'm not inherently good at physics. I sort of chose the hardest career path for me because it's not something that I'm, naturally gifted at. But writing is something that I'm much more comfortable with. And in another life, I would be, a full-time writer. So that said, I reached this point in my PhD where I started reflecting on what my experience was, how I got here, and more of these sort of pernicious feelings of non-belonging. And I think just trying to contextualize my journey. And it was on the heels of a major surgery. And I think I was really interested in talking about it more openly. I had talked about it online. I talked about my experiences as a woman in STEM and medical journey online. But I think I constantly felt frustrated that it was sort of a one-dimensional image of what my journey is. And I think it's a flattening of someone's full human experience. And so this book was my opportunity to flesh that out and I think really dig into some of these deeper questions that I was really curious about in my own life, and then more universally, with others' lives as well.
Your book came out June of this year, just a short time ago, and you call it Starstruck, a memoir of astrophysics and finding the light in the dark. And that is a profound title. So my mind went all kinds of different directions in the sense of, is it a metaphor, finding the light in the dark? Does it have to do with what you're doing as a career? So share with me, where did the title come from?
I can credit my wonderful literary agent for coming up with that. I wish I was that wonderful with words, but she did a phenomenal job. And I think it really fits very well. I think it's the beauty of that title and of the book in general, I think, is that it's both. It's It's the science of finding these beacons of light in the dark universe, which is what I do every day, studying supernova, which are, exploding stars that shine brighter than a galaxy. And then it's also, in a life of incredible challenges and tumultuous experiences, how do you find your own light? That basically is how I construct the book. So every chapter, a science section bookmarks each chapter. I trace, the evolution of my life and who I am at the same time that I have these more, direct science sections that trace the evolution of the universe. So I thought that was a really interesting format to do exactly what you just asked in the title of doing both.
You wrote a piece of everything and put it in this book, and now it's out, it's public, and I hope everyone who is watching today will read this book and really see what an incredible journey you are on, what you're creating, what you've already done. So what's next?
I think a vacation, probably. Some sleep. No, I'm graduating my PhD this year. And then I think I don't have plans for what's next. I'm very much in the let's explore and see what's out there. And I think continue to, explore new possibilities. I never in a million years would have imagined that I would write a book in grad school. So I think I'm very excited to see, what comes next.
And you're so young. I mean, you have so many years ahead of you, so much more knowledge to gain and just more of the experience of what's coming next. But during all of this, you also shared another side to you as an advocate for yourself. You shared your story about the BRCA2 undergoing a double mastectomy, and you were so open about the journey and why you chose to do what you wanted, what you did. And I wanted to know if you could talk to me a little bit about that today. It was a preventative surgery, I understand, and I just kind of want to know, one, that's so brave. As a cancer, as a woman diagnosed with cancer, I can somewhat understand some of the thought process, but going through a preventative, it's a whole different thing. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. I really appreciate that. So my grandmother, when I was a kid, was diagnosed with ovarian cancer and then died of pancreatic cancer. And when I was 23, my dad was diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer. And it was extremely aggressive, and I think really was a shock to all of us. I mean, prostate cancer typically isn't diagnosed that late. And so because of his family history with his mom and how aggressive it was, he got genetic testing and came back positive for the BRCA2 gene mutation. And shortly afterwards, I too got genetic testing and learned that I was positive. And my sort of genetic risk profile was an 87% lifetime risk of breast cancer and a 30% lifetime risk of ovarian cancer. I mean, that's a lot for anyone. It's a lot for a 23-year-old who, is just sort of trying to figure out how to be an adult. And I went through, the full spectrum of sort of dissociation and pretending like it didn't exist. And then all of a sudden, I was 25 and had to get my first breast MRI, and they found something. And I was so anxious and I was so overcome with the fear that I would have cancer at the same time my dad had cancer. And ultimately, the spot was benign, but they wanted to start monitoring me every 6 months and, do the whole thing. And for me, I learned then that I could get a double mastectomy. And do it preventatively. And that was really game changing for me because it allowed me to be proactive rather than reactive. I was, young and healthy. I didn't have children yet. I was sort of in this time in my life where I could have the time to do something like that. And I couldn't, for me, it felt like I was reclaiming agency over my diagnosis and my health. So I had 3 surgeries in 1 year, which was a lot, especially for a PhD student who was supposed to be doing research. But I couldn't be happier with my decision. And it was really important to me to share my journey with the world because women's bodies are not talked about, and at least not in this way. And it was a way for me to educate others, on genetic testing and on preventative healthcare. And my hope was that by sharing my story, I would help others feel less alone in, their own journeys.
And the key word being preventative. A lot of people don't understand what genetic testing is even to this day, but it's such a huge factor and precursors for cancer, for diabetes. I mean, there's so many studies, and you're so young to have made such a big decision and to also be open about it. But then you took it a step further and you shared this story, and you did an incredibly beautiful photo shoot with Sports Illustrated. And
Thank you.
I was looking at the pictures and I'm thinking to myself, wow, you go, girl.
Thank you.
And I was like, wow, what an incredible example for so many young women, because we get caught up in shaming ourselves. We also, a lot of women, I think by you being so vocal about what you chose, helped women see the importance of being proactive and not waiting till it's too late, because that's unfortunately what happens often is we don't advocate for ourselves and we wait till it's too late and we're already in stage 2, 3, 4, and it's harder. So when I was looking at these pictures on Sports Illustrated, I thought, wow, what a beautiful young woman. And the message isn't the glitz and the glamour. The message is completely the opposite of that. And so how did you do that?
Thank you. That's very kind of you. I think, I'm not the first to say this, that scars are beautiful. And that was an exercise for me after my mastectomy and after my, all my surgeries. And it wasn't always, I didn't always feel proud. I definitely felt a full spectrum of emotions. And I think that's normal going through something like that. But to varying degrees, we all experience that. I think the shame is so real, shame that women have over their bodies or, not feeling fully in their bodies. And I think because it was such an acute example of me having to, by necessity, fall back in love with my body and feel at home in my skin, because, when you go into surgery, you wake up and you have a different body essentially. And it's such a stark, thing to happen to you. And so I felt more in my body after going through this than I ever had in my entire life. And that Sports Illustrated photo shoot and that, being in the magazine was something I never thought I would ever do. And it was so empowering. It was such a beautiful experience to be shooting with some incredible people and just get to feel beautiful and get to feel, worthy and confident. I think you don't need to be an SI to feel that way. I think it's, you can do things in your life every day to feel more at home in your body and more grounded in it and more connected to yourself and to others. SI was one example of me being able to do that after surgery, but I think all of us can probably integrate that more in our daily lives.
I think you probably really gave a lot of women a boost of confidence and courage to all want to apply to Swimsuit Illustrated.
That's amazing. Yeah, I hope so.
To get out there and say, you know what, here I am, take me as I am. This is because women are beautiful. Women are smart. We're the full package. I say this all the time.
Yeah.
And you are a great example of that as well. In terms of, going through a double mastectomy and that process itself, how is your mindset? How is your mental and emotional well-being through that time? Were you going through things? Was it hard? Did you have support?
Yeah, it was definitely hard. I think one of the things that made it, there were a couple things that made it more doable for me. One of those is just the fact that I was choosing to do it. That choice really shifted my mindset and from something that's happening to me to something that I'm choosing to better my life and my health and my body. And that allowed me to, I guess, lean into the process a little bit more. I did so much research to find a medical team that I believed in and who believed in me. My surgeon is a breast cancer survivor and is pioneering the world of mastectomies and breast reconstruction because she is doing sensation preservation, which for those who don't know, most of the time you lose your sensation in your breasts when you get a mastectomy. But she has created this sort of alternative to grasp the nerves or keep the nerves, preserve them so that you don't lose sensation. And that was really, really exciting. And I think pivotal, when I was relearning my body, I already had the sensation, so it wasn't as jarring. So yeah, having the ultimate confidence in my medical team and really trusting the process. And then of course, yeah, the support from my community. My partner was phenomenal. And then I think I had friends fly in from all over the country for weeks after my surgery, sort of one person would be there for a couple of days and another person would be there for a couple of days. So it sort of, dispersed the load on any one person. Exactly. And that was so fun. Honestly, I got to see my friends. It was it's a big thing for 20-year-olds to have to, help each other with. But I felt more connected to my community than I think I ever had. And there's something about walking through a very difficult moment, but getting to walk through it with people who love you that make it, much more manageable.
So another thing that you describe and that I've read about you is an analog astronaut. And I have to ask, what is that?
So an analog astronaut is somebody who has completed basically simulation of what it is like to live and be an astronaut on another planet or on the moon. So I basically lived as though I was on Mars in this, isolated habitat on a volcano in Hawaii. So you're in the middle of nowhere and, you're conducting research, you're keeping the hab functional, you're basically doing all of the tasks and the responsibilities that an astronaut might do. And the idea is to do and perform these analog missions to basically test things here on Earth before actually going to the moon or Mars. And, when something goes wrong, being able to understand how to fix it when, humanity is, a couple hundred miles away rather than, much farther. And it's also an interesting way to explore crew dynamics and study, what is it like for people to live together in the middle of nowhere for 6 months. Mine was only 2 weeks, but some missions are a year long. So, yeah, I did that, let's see, a year after my last surgery. So it was a really exciting thing for me to kind of go through the gambit of these health things and then be able to sort of pursue a dream of mine.
I was on I think it was your Instagram page, and I saw you had written a post and it said, basically you have check marks of the things that you've done. And there was one that says, go to space, the box is there and the check is not. So obviously, you know what I'm going to ask you next. Is that for you to go to space?
Yeah, that's definitely a goal of mine. I think it's a goal / dream. I will do everything in my power to try to get there, but I'm under no illusion that it's something that's easy or comes naturally. I think it's a lot of luck, a lot of hard work and opportunity, and I think I can just keep trying to put myself into better positions to hopefully one day get there.
Sarafina, what does that look like for you to be able to check that box off? What are some of the things that would have to happen in order for that to be a reality?
I think first get my PhD. that has to happen. And then, continuing to sort of do these a little bit, I don't know, more off the wall experiences like an analog astronaut simulation, get my pilot's license, become, I am currently scuba certified, but become sort of more of an expert in scuba diving. And I think just the advice that was given to me is basically find something you're passionate about and become excellent at it. So
great.
Who knows what that will be? But yeah, I think, the best thing about wanting to be an astronaut is, or I'm ending up finding things I'm interested in and getting to do those, which, the journey is more important than the destination. And so, I think there are a lot of opportunities to, improve my CV on that front, but I'm excited to get to do that.
Is there anything that you're not afraid of?
I am afraid of so many things. I I think the mental health aspect is going to be something, I struggle with anxiety, which is basically a fear of everything, I think.
Yes.
But I think the thing is you have a fear, but you do it anyway. During my surgeries, I was so scared, but you walk into the fear and you can keep going. I'm told that's what being brave is. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think we're all scared. We just, whether you listen to that fear or not.
I did read something about that too, that you shared about struggles with anxiety. And, for women, I feel like when we speak up about that, we're looked at a little differently than if a man was to share about him being anxious or dealing with anxiety and things like that. How has that affected you with work?
Mental health is such a tricky thing to talk about, and I think all genders experience some sort of we haven't built a good infrastructure or system for people to be able to talk about it without judgment or shame.
You are so right.
I wish it were better, but I think that's why, it's so important to be, to the extent that you can and feel comfortable with, candid and honest about what you're struggling with. I find that being honest about it, again, it's sort of empowering. It makes me feel like I'm choosing to, tackle the problem head on. And I think it's something that has probably affected my work, just in the sense that, it affects how I show up at work. I feel scared of asking questions or scared of, looking stupid. But I think what I've learned through a lot of therapy is that most of that is because I am literally in a place that is not designed for someone like me. And a lot of what I'm feeling is real. You know, I probably am looked at differently, and I probably am perceived differently. And that's on the system. That's not on me. And I can, all I have to do is just keep showing up in the ways that I can, and not blame myself so much. I think that's a lot of it, but it's tricky. I think it's a very difficult thing.
In addition to you being a woman of color, I would say most people in this field are quite a bit older, right?
Yeah.
You're considered a younger woman in this field as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like for my medical team, my doctor is probably close to your age. He's actually the same age as my son. And so when he walked in the room, the very first thing he said to me was, I know. I know. And I'm
But he's aware.
Doogie Howser is happening now. But he is smart as a whip and continues to save my life on a daily. So, I mean, you have all these different obstacles that you just keep bursting through. So I want to commend you, congratulate you, and tell you, please do not give up, because you are in such a special, like the time is now. The way society is, the way the world is, everything is changing, and you have the perfect time to leave an imprint and make those changes for women of color, for women, period, and women in STEM. And I'm so honored to have gotten to talk to you today.
Thank you so much. This is so kind of you to say, and it's an honor to talk to you too. I'm really excited to be here, and to chat, all things about, I don't know, my life, my career, and about the book. It's been a dream to sort of explore all of these different threads, and I don't know, try to get at the institutional, issues that come up, or the structural issues that, are barriers, and, women like us and young women can sort of dismantle to pursue their dreams.
Well, before we end, I would love for you to share where everyone can go and get this incredible book.
Starstruck, a memoir of astrophysics and finding light in the dark, is available everywhere you find your books. Support your local indie bookstore, or grab it, online on Amazon. Yes, it's available everywhere. So
now, are you doing any in-person book signings?
I am. Yeah, I have. Let's see. I'm going to be in the Bay Area for a couple of events this week and next week, and then I'll be in Boston talking with Sasha Sagan, who is Carl Sagan's daughter. Let's see, on July 17th, I think. So yeah, if anyone's in Boston, come find me.
Wow. Well, I'm so proud of you, Sarafina, and thank you again for coming on. Congratulations to you. And I can't wait to see where you go to next. But I have a feeling it's going to be out of this world.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarafina.